Good morning to Mr. Amin and my fellow classmates. Today I'll be talking about my literature review with my groupmate being Eason, and my name is Shengan. So moving to our first subtopic, which is the impacts of gender discrimination on female participation in sports. The title of this article we've chosen is The Impact of the Media on Gender Inequality Within Sports, with the author being Aeon J. Tolan. The purpose that we have found out is that it demonstrates that even though there are assertions that female athletes are now regarded as equal to male athletes, there's still a focus on female physical appearance rather than their physical abilities, hence forcing women out of the sport industry because of gender inequality. The findings from this article is that the results have revealed a strong emphasis on physical appearance and non-sporting qualities of female athletes in Korea. The findings stated that these athletes shown were known for their beauty instead of their achievements that they got in the sport. For example, Son Yeon-jae is a world-class rhythmic gymnast, ranked top 10 in the world, but the news reporter focuses more on her personal life. Despite just being 18 years old, she is portrayed in highly sexualized images and has become a prominent figure in numerous commercials that highlight her physical attractiveness instead of her sporting achievements. Moving on to our second article, which the title being Impact of Gender Inequality on Women's Team Sports, Evidence from Europe. The author is a Turkish person, Selçuk Ozadin. And the purpose that we have analyzed from this article is that this study explores the correlation between gender inequality and success, specifically considering gender stereotypes in three popular European team sports: football, basketball, and volleyball. The findings we have found out from this article is that gender inequality negatively affects success in women's football, while countries with higher women's population, tend to have greater success. Another finding we have found out is that the ranking of men's football teams also have a positive influence on women's rankings, indicating that nations with higher ranked male teams tend to perform better in women football. Similar determinants of success are observed in basketball, but the women's population is found to be statistically insignificant. The impact of gender inequality on success differs across sports, with football and basketball negatively affected, while women's volleyball shows a positive association with gender inequality. Hence, countries with higher gender inequality tend to have less success in sports. Moving on to our second subtopic, which is the factors leading to gender inequality among women's sports, with the title of this article being Gender Inequality and Female Sport Participation in Turkey. It's written by Meltem Ince Yeremans. And the purpose we can analyze from this article is to understand Turkey's women roles regarding connection between sports and politics. And the main purpose is to see the barriers to women's gender discrimination and the factors leading to it. The findings we can find out from this article is that family plays a huge influence and a role in motivating girls to participate in women's sport. So without it, gender inequality will likely increase. The second finding is that the unavailability of facilities and equipment dedicated to female teams negatively affects the female participation and increases gender inequality because it shows a lack of priorities to the female athletes. The third finding is that the media misrepresentation adversely impacts on the female involvement in sports. And moving on to the next article, I'll pass it on to Issa.
The second article we found was titled Rethinking Women's Sport Research, Looking in the Mirror and Reflecting Forward. The purpose of this research article is to engage a wide variety of stakeholders in the women's sport ecosystem and gain a better understanding of the state of women's sport landscape and the factors to it. The first findings found that one of the factors that played a part in the gender inequality in sports is that variation in perspective and priorities among different occupational groups. The second finding shows another factor in the gender inequality is the ongoing fight for equal rights, resources, and recognition of women's sports. The third finding showed that a factor of gender inequality is demonstrated by a lack of acknowledgement of the unique role played by women athletes in advocating for social justice and driving social change. The third subtopic is effects of gender discrimination to popularity of the sport. The first research article we found is titled Women in International Elite Athletics, Gender Inequality and National Participation. The purpose of this research article is to analyze the macro-social gender inequality and how it affects participation in international women's athletics, thus the popularity of women's sport. The first finding found out that countries with a higher macro-social gender equality appear to host more women's events, thus more popularity towards the sport. The second finding also showed that countries with higher level of political empowerment for women tend to have a higher share of women athletes. The third finding shows that gender inequality might not directly affect the popularity of a sport, but a well-resourced development strategy is needed. The second article is titled Exposure to Women's Sport, Changing Attitudes Toward Female Athletes. The purpose of this is to see how increased exposure affect the popularity of female sport and whether or not it is mainly caused by gender discrimination. Findings have found that because of gender inequality, there's a lack of media coverage compared to men, so there's a perception of lower importance and interest in the women's sport. It showed that reducing prejudice would increase interest in the sport and female athletes. The second finding also found out that because of lack of media coverage, people don't really connect with their local female sports communities. So this means that sport is less appealing when there's a lot of gender inequalities. The third finding also found that increased coverage can only help women to reduce prejudice for a few weeks, so that the interest in sport will not develop through increased media. So this means that even when there's prejudice is reduced, it will not affect the popularity of sport much. Thank you for listening.